in the meditations in the morning, we have the stage where we contemplate the I am. And the aim of that is to, by not finishing that sentence, or not investing in the finishing of that sentence, I am this or I am that, in the present tense even. By not finishing that sentence, what we're doing is exposing what's always already here as something to be experienced. Because the moment it's I am a girl, or I am a boy, or whatever, I am useless. The moment it's I am something, it's less than what it is anyway. It's less, it's reduced, it's gone into a kind of tunnel of limitation. And this is huge. We have this being, which we are, anyway, helplessly. And then we have this thing, this self-definition, this identity, which reduces what is anyway there. So it's like you have an ocean within yourself, and you take a test tube and you take a bit of the water and you say, this is the ocean, only this. So in that third movement, and often, you know, I am is also an invitation to identification. We finish the sentence because we're trained like this. So, and we try and make it wider because we're being spiritual, right? So I am human. This is also a tremendous limitation. Why is it a tremendous limitation? Because for each one of us, human is loaded with a totally different bunch of groceries. Energetically seen. For some, human is like a curse. It's horrific. It's a disaster. It's an accident of God. It's like a mistake. It was condemned out of the Garden of Eden. It's a symbol of failure, spiritually seen. I'm not saying this is true, I'm saying this is what some people carry with the word human. Others carry a vast superiority to animals. Which, if you look into it, is a little bit strange, because what is a human biologically seen but an animal? With a bit extra appendage, you know. So dung beetles have an appendage where they can photograph the stars, and like this, by taking snapshots of where the stars are in the cosmos, they find their way between one lump of dung and another. Can you believe that? So humans have an appendage, these mammals called humans have an appendage where they can think about stuff. They can identify.
An arm is an appendage of the body.
An add-on. Application.
No, is that application?
It's an app.
It's not an addition.
A feature.
A different app.
A feature.
A feature.
So that is a different load of garbage on the identity human, which is a pretty wide identity. I am human. Superior toward the top of the food chain, superior in evolution, conquering the world, in control of the whole planet. You know, what I don't see doesn't exist because I am human.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah. Well, that's another piece of garbage from the other side. That's the cursed human, or both, because a lot of this is not checked. It's not processed. It's just programmed. There's another kind of truckload about being human, which is that human is some kind of ideal of qualities of what should represent, that this one's human and this one's not human. The ISIS, the terrorists, they are inhuman. They're not human. Human is this and this and this, and everything that's glorious and decent and okay is human. And I stand for that. It's also a truckload of stuff. It's just an abstraction, but it's an abstraction that that carries with it just one word, a whole story of trauma and woundedness and pain. If it's the arrogant human that believes he's above nature, then it's carrying the trauma of separation from the planet, from nature, from the belief because of this separation that there is better or worse, that there is hierarchies, which means that this human that believes like that is always being measured as better or worse, and is constantly in a conflict of better or worse. Everybody they see, everything they meet, even looking at themselves a week ago or themselves in the future, is measured by better or worse. Am I above or below? Am I superior or am I less? They're caught. Because whatever they attain, whatever they get in terms of this superior status, there's always above. Because they're deeply programmed in always comparing, and there's always somebody better, so they're always at the same time worse. They're kind of cursed by themselves, just with the label. And I just take one strand of the kind of things that can go with a label. The one who feels that to be human is some kind of disaster, of guilt, is constantly condemning humanity. Funnily enough, these people often become healers because they have to fix it because it's so bad and it's up to them. They get caught in fixing everything, but they always fail to fix what's already here, as it is. These are the change makers. So every healer at some stage comes to a place where to really move with the quality of healing, they need to release the agenda to fix stuff. Because actually they're condemning every client in a way. You need fixing, and I'm the one to fix it. It's a power structure. Not allowed to die, well that's unfortunate, because we all die. And this is real stuff, you know, it's like, it's very easy to say it and say, aha, silly them, but it's not. In real time, when somebody's dying and you want to help, and the passion for life is such that you want them to live, and this is in our bones of every animal, to preserve life, and they die, there is a feeling of failure. But it's to believe in that I failed to save this person is so grandiose. It's really grandiose. As if because we are healers, we are gods. We decide life and death, we decide birth and death. We can make somebody live forever. You know, the head of Google is trying to introduce robots that have consciousness so that he can get eternal life happening in machine form. This is the head engineer of Google. You know, it's a little bit crazy. Fixing, and making it worse and worse and worse because we're constantly condemning. And in the end we're fixing stuff and we don't even know what it is we're fixing because we don't let it be there in the first place to see it. So it becomes like degrees of illusion. You know, in the north of Israel when they first came here, they decided that the mosquitoes were terrible. What? We don't need to write it down.
Yes, I think it's important.
So they drained the hula. They decided to fix everything by draining the hula, so there'd be no mosquitoes. Great Zionistic project. We're going to fix it up, you know. So they drained the whole hula, and there was a kind of environmental catastrophe to the ecosystem. So they said, "Okay, let's fix it. Let's flood the hula." It's these ping-pongs between like fixing them, attempts to fix, the failed attempt to fix, and it goes on and on and on, and we increasingly, and this is true of also how we work with ourselves, you know, you lose the connection with what is anyway already there, with seeing at least what is there. And if we see it with the eyes of condemnation, this is not good enough, then we're not really able to interact with it. Like if we see another person And as a starting point in seeing this other person, they're not good enough. You know, how limited are our possibilities to relate then? So in the meditation with the I am, you know, in the spaces away, in a way, what we talked about yesterday, which is nothing. Not a thing, just being. Being without any need to attach or to entangle. It doesn't mean it doesn't attach and entangle. It means it doesn't have to. It exists independently of this being. Attachments and entanglements and identities. It doesn't need them to be. So every identity is caught in two ways. Its first restriction, and this is a formula you'll find in every sense, is a restriction in time.
Every form is caught in two ways?
Every identity narrows through two principles. A contraction in time, it's caught in time. It's not now. It's either for the future, I want to be, or it's from the past, I have always been, I was born this, or my mother was this. So it's not now. If it's not now, it's caught in time. It doesn't survive the now, not when you inquire into it as an absolute thing. It can't survive the release from time. And every identity is caught in a limitation of space. So
it's like location?
Space, so it can be location, so I am Israeli. It's a limitation in space rather than I am human, for example. But it can also be a limitation in space. I am female. It's
the space that we are.
It's a particular use of space. You know, tits and bum and whatever is defined as female. It's a lot more of a limitation in space energetically. So that's hard if we kind of don't quite know where to go to feel this being and to stay there. And it's like, and we're so deeply programmed otherwise. So how do we find a sense of being? Firstly, it's here and now. Here and now burns identity, it burns the absolute status of form, meaning form, at the moment you're here and now, it's not just you in a form, even energetically, there's a whole load of people, there's a space, there's everything, there's all kinds of possibilities in where your consciousness moves through the here and now. So there's no longer this limitation on space, you know what I mean? Or on a particular mood, or on a particular perspective on reality, or it becomes, like Rachel said, fluid. But one of the keys to being, because it's really beyond the mind, is a feeling which happens in the here and now.
Feeling?
Feeling. We can't feel anything at all except here and now.
You mean because if I speak about a feeling that I had yesterday, it's simply only speaking about a feeling that I had yesterday. So it's constantly putting it in the past or the future.
Yeah.
So even though I might say, well, I feel, etc., I feel, you know, I'm very sad or something, that I might actually be feeling sad because and then you ask me why or what's going on, and I'm actually retelling you a story that happened yesterday. And so that actually I'm associating this feeling, this experience of feeling, to what happened yesterday. And it's not necessarily anything to do with what might be happening in that very moment.
This is exactly what we do. We get a feeling of pain, and it's cuts, it's got a depth to it, it's got a truth to it. And so we identify it, this is a feeling of pain. And in a way we hold the feeling. of pain in a kind of emotional memory. And often by the time you come to the stage that you say, I'm feeling sad, you're not actually feeling sad anymore because you don't want to feel the feeling, and that's why you put it in your head and put it in the memory bank in the first place. And so, but at the same time what's possible is there's an emotional memory, other part of the brain, which is that the moment you really allow the memory of a feeling, you're feeling it now. So in a therapeutic context, if you say, I'm feeling sad blah, 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 because of yesterday, da, 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 it's to put the person in the present tense, to speak in the present tense and to feel what's there now. You know, who cares about yesterday? There was no such thing. To move back to that feeling of sadness, or to see if it's still there. And if that's the end of the story, because again, you know, to name a feeling, this is an emotional identification, it's very good to name it, but then when you name it, you're also saying it's a fixed thing and this is like an object. And if you agree to feel it, it becomes more fluid. So the art is to name it, the sadness, and then to release it again, to feel it. Because only by feeling it can you really know what's good. Maybe underneath sadness is rage, maybe within the sadness is grief, who knows what's there. We don't know until we feel it. There's no way to know. There's no textbook for life. Really not.
So naming the feeling, but then you're saying release the naming of it and allow to see what's coming up right now in the moment.
Feel the feeling. It doesn't even matter if the feeling's coming up in the moment. It's like, okay, there's discomfort. You have to feel it to know what it's about, to experience what it's about.
But usually when you look at it, it transforms. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Look at the anger.
When you agree to feel it.
It transforms sadness or to helplessness.
It becomes alive.
The minute I look at it here and now, it changes.
And do you think it's more real when you keep it fixed and don't feel it?
If it's more real, it's more stable.
It's stable in your head, not anybody else's. It's stable as an abstraction, and this is what the mind does. It builds a story, because a story you can depend on. But the story has no soul. It's not real. So it's got a story about this feeling of anger, or whatever. And this is stable. It holds. But if I feel the anger, it's all going to move, and maybe there'll be pain and grief and all of this. Whoa, so let's make it anger, and hold it here. This way we don't suffer. But what's happening now? We move out of being. Completely. And into the head. The mind is controlling life. At least it thinks it is. But the feeling's still there. But now it's unhooked, so the mind actually lost control. At a certain stage you explode in a rage. You don't know where it came from. But you feel like beating yourself up. Because the mind lost its grip. It thinks it was in control by clutching, but actually it completely unanchored itself and went off on a fantasy. A fantasy of stability. Feelings are not stable. That's why it's so important to move behind them to that which can feel.
Then if you want to understand it or to understand the reason or the action that maybe you should take,
You move in pure judgment. I'm not saying you're judgmental, but judgment.
of the feelings.
You mean discernment,
Automatically, if you want to
judgment?
understand, why do you want to understand? What is the reason?
Actually, the reason is, for example, I was really angry at my kid, and
Yeah.
I felt that it was something mine. She was not part of it.
Exactly, so there is a
So I wanted
judgment
to
there.
see if I can avoid it in some way.
So that's the judgment. It's not good to be angry like this. You regretted to be angry.
Because she...
So what should you do about it?
Because there was a guilt afterwards. Because she wasn't, she didn't do anything.
She
except
wasn't
of being
happy.
there.
Yeah, so she was not happy with it.
No,
No, you hurt her.
yes,
Yeah. And you felt guilty.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to understand what happened with this anger.
Yeah. And if you understand it, does it change?
Maybe yes, because in this particular case, I understood that it come often on the basis of sort of stress with helplessness, like when I cannot handle things, and then I said, okay, maybe I should think of how can I handle things, or decide not to handle all of it.
So there is a
And
change.
not come to this point of anger, just because I can, how do you say,
No, it's not good. It's let it go.
I can let go some of the things that just will not happen. So it's okay.
So to move more in the relaxation, into being in the here and now.
Yeah, but the point is that when I tried to look at this anger, I felt after a few minutes that I just want to cry. I mean, the anger said, okay, so I'm not angry, I'm sad. No, I'm not sad. So what is it? What's going on? It changes every time I looked at it. It transforms, and I couldn't understand what is it there.
Yes.
You know, we can go into a whole story, but the key ingredient here is to release your daughter about this anger being anything to do with her, exclusively. I'm experiencing anger right now. It might not be to do with you, and it might be as well. But you know, I'm just feeling really angry right now. This is the first thing, because you're loading on guilt and this and this and this, and it's setting you in a kind of panic of being a good parent, and this is all too much illusion. This is all disconnecting you from your daughter. Ought to be in order to understand. To understand anything at all. You know, scientist, laboratory, he wants to understand this fish. He has to put the fish in a petri dish. He needs to take a microscope, he needs to study it, he needs to feel it, he needs to look at the details, he needs to experience what it is, this fishness. That's understand. Out of this, understanding arises of itself from the fish. The mind follows the feeling or the object or the affliction or the experience. It's, you know, it's not that your feelings are running away from you, only, because also they are, because you're not allowed to be angry, so instead you come and cry, you know, like, I'm in pain, you know, like so. But this is also part of it, there's space for both. You know, you're in the laboratory now, you go into your anger, I'm going to go into my anger, let's see what this anger is about. But you've decided it's anger, now the sneaky bugger, it became pain. I became a child, like my daughter. So there's space for the wounded child as well. You're understanding, right? So you have to perceive it. You have to allow it to tell its story. Something else comes forward. Incredible sense of condemnation and despair. I'm just making stuff up. There's space for that as well. There's only space for all of this. When you have the space, you give it the space from a place of being, from the place of the know thing. Respect it, let it be. Let it be doesn't mean, no, we're dealing with anger now, I don't want pain and I don't want this and I don't want that. That's not let it be. It's another way to repress of the mind, it's sneaky. Understanding the head must follow the feeling.
What I want there to be.
Exactly, the mind has to stop being the big dictator and realize that without listening to the people, it doesn't have what to dictate. It's losing control. There's a revolution coming. The mind really has to, and the mind can be an incredible tool if it is able to follow what's real with an openness rather than dictate what's real. So the art is to name it and then to release the name and to pay homage on the knees, the mind, towards the high priest of feeling. The Prime Minister goes to the Pope and says, ultimately, you are the authority. And I know you're changing all the time.
And if from what you're saying, I have a headache and sort of heat coming up. Only from here what you're saying.
Well, it's kind of one way or another, this is going to happen because a revolution will come from feeling. The mind is a brilliant tool. It's an organ of perception. Organs of perceptions are about perceiving what's there. They're not about making stuff up. We pretend I'm feeling good when I'm a good texture here when I'm feeling a horrible texture here. That's not sensitivity. Sensitivity is openness. And the mind is a sense organ. It's the headquarters, but its job is to receive information. And maybe it can help form it temporarily before releasing it again. It's not a creator. When it believes itself to be a creator of truth, of reality, and some people really believe this, but they get into lots of trouble with themselves. They suffer at a certain stage. They suffer because they become so alienated from life, which keeps bashing in the other direction, you know. And there was somebody who said reality just took a huge dump on the way things should be because it was raining in the spring. And she posted it on her Facebook page. Reality just shat on the way things ought to be. And that's so funny. It cracked me up completely because this is how it works.
Was she joking or was she serious?
She was joking. She was
joking.
She's cynical.
Okay.
But doesn't the mind create expectation?
For sure.
Like, okay, so I expect to find a good parking space, and I find it. I expect the people to be good, and they are. So I don't know if it's such a bad thing to limit myself completely. You know, not all the time, but in a way, if I sort of, it's usually expectation. I expect the world to be nasty.
Yeah.
It's going to be nasty.
Yeah.
But if I expect it to be good, or good to me, or pleasant, usually is. Now the expectation.
Yeah, complete bullshit.
Yeah.
It's also limiting. I understand that, but
it has a slight positive effect in polarity to having negative expectations. So it's better to expect good than to expect bad.
yeah.
But it's still expectation.
Yes.
And you know, children have swung on the rope in Auschwitz, but expected only good. You know, it's not true. It's not going to save you. Wishful thinking, it's magical thinking of a child that if I think good and I will create good and I will be safe. It's a positive attitude, optimism and good expectations and seeing the best and seeing the promise. It's all a good place to sit, but don't believe in it too much. Be open, because every single good thing has in polarity a bad thing. You took the parking place and some cripple couldn't park anymore.
Anymore. You're optimism fucking someone else. No, sometimes I do feel guilty. Here we go. I say, oh wow, yeah, that's nice, but you know, somebody else maybe deserved it more than I do.
And what if you expect a parking place? This is an interesting question. And there is no parking place. What's happening then inside?
Nothing much.
No. So
No, because the expectation was 80%. So you say, okay, today's the 20%.
Okay, so that's the way to do it. But some of us expect a parking place, put an effort in it by expecting it, and then there is no parking place. So we didn't expect good enough. So then it becomes a whole life, a whole story in itself, in which again, when you see, it's like a manipulation of the mind. If we think positive, the world will be positive. If we think good, good will come to us. And if not good, bad is coming to us, we didn't think good enough. There is a difference between what you have very much a positive way of, optimistic way of looking towards life, which is really helpful, it makes you a more happy person. And thinking that expectation is creating reality.
Is it?
No.
But it's filtering reality.
It's creating illusion.
Yeah, no, but it filters. You know, you bought a car of a certain kind, all of a sudden all the cars that you see are that particular car.
Yeah. that filters reality. It means if you expect a friendly person with the whole gathering of persons, you will focus on the person which is friendly, and the other person doesn't exist basically in your perception if the expectation is strong enough. So it helps to focus, maybe.
There is reality which, when you go to the source of it, is something which can't be expressed or felt. It's formless. It's got a, you can sense it, you can smell it. What's real, but it's very much a sense and a direction. This is reality. Nobody created it, it's beyond creation. When we talk about creating reality, it's taking that realness, that sense of realness, and investing it in a form. It's saying this form is real. I'm giving reality to this form. So if you visit a mental asylum, you'll see many extreme realities which are not in any way connected to the whole. You'll meet 3 Jesuses. This has been the investment of that reality into a form of an energetic and mental form. And I don't want to separate from to make that division between sane and insane, because we're all insane. We just have that division to make us feel like we're sane, but we're doing it all the time. We invest reality in stuff. We get a pain of rejection. We invest it with a reality which is so much more. Such a colouring. So we create this reality. So what happens then? So we get this pain of reality. It has this impact of truth, because it really hurt. So it's got a realness about it. So we invest rejection with this reality. And then we come into a room and 29 people say, "Hey, Maital, wonderful to see you." And one person is there, "You bitch." You only see her. She's more real than all the rest. We go into the shop and we feel so fucking rejected already and not part of and not belonging that we're kind of inviting this. You know, the guy says, "Hello." No. He's like, you know they're going to reject you, right? You know, I'm absolutely shit at cleaning the house. I'm giving you a real-time example now of how we create realities. So, and I've been really kind of beaten up by this from before I was even able to talk by my mother. It's partly why I became shit at cleaning a house. I have no idea if I'm good or not. It's just so damaged, this kind of domestic cleanliness. And I'm creating reality for myself now, because now you're all projecting on me, "Oh dear, I better kind of tiptoe around her with the cleanliness issue, or maybe I can help out, or, you know, like help her clean, or show her how to clean." You know, it already starts, you know. But this is how realities are created. Somebody comes with, you know, Dora Rashum to the door, and I start to apologize. To excuse my right to exist in my own living room. It's a nightmare. Someone knocks on the door, I'm going to open it. Someone's going to see the domestic shame. And so what do? There's like, something must be really wrong here. They begin to judge. So whereas before I would have been, like, if I'd been Bart's oldest daughter, completely free of any judgment, suddenly I'm vulnerable. I'm inviting it. I'm inviting this reality. Give me more domestic shame. I'm not done with it yet. I want more. And I still have to master this. Shame me domestically, you know. And it's not just a story. It hurts like hell. It really hurts like hell. This is living material that we are to ourselves. It's real pain. It's pain like murder sometimes when we move into these spaces. It's 3D. It feels real like hell. And in one sense, it is real. And what happens in those moments is we lose our connection to being, which is also real, more real. So what we're trying to do in this course is open up a consolidation, a firm place to be in being. And what you already see is that being, which is very much, the felt sense of being is very much at the key to the heart, maftech halev in the heart, you know, this sense of you-ness, the vitalness. How it is to be you, without all the bullshit, without all the other people, without all the things. Have this, before we even get to the kind of purer sense of being, there is a sense of you-ness. There's a sense of Dana-ness. We all know it. We recognize it in each other. You know, I can sense Dana-ness with my eyes closed, and from a distance there's Dana-ness. Soft Dana-ness. She can sense it as well, but she can sense it, which means it's not an end point. But this is the movement back towards being. There's a Jina-ness. There's a genuineness which is not good or bad, and it's not caught in time, it's not caught in space, it doesn't have to be anything or anyone. There just is a genuineness. Which is why in the meditation we have also the name. Not just as a kind of, really not to, in order to realize the identity for what it is and to move, because we're doing it in the heart, to the felt sense of you. The you-ness, or the me-ness. This is not identity, it's descriptive, it's a description. It's a feeling. It's a feeling which can refine. It's a feeling which has got such a love in it, such a power in it as well. The problem is when we begin to allow it, shit starts to kick up, you know. Almost like a rage that it's denied, that it's not allowed to be, that it's not, because it's rejected, because it's condemned, because it doesn't get what it needs to express.
The meanness? Is that
yes,
okay.
the genuineness is kind of not welcomed.
But that's when we're already moving out of just the pure being.
As it expands, it meets the blocks. So the art is to kind of stay in it, to rest in it, and this takes a deep relaxation because it's very alive. And let the meeting blocks happen as well. It's not either or. So the mind comes, as the beingness expands, it meets the blocks. The mind is conditioned with very bad software right now. We're very much unevolved, which says either or, which is complete illusion. Or it's the pure genuineness, or it's this incredible pain. So we immediately lose connection with the beingness, the being. And we go for the pain, and then we try to adjust it, and we're already one step away from the pure essential beingness of being, which is here anyway. We got blinded to it. So this either or is very much how our belief structures are formed. Remember the belief structures?
Yeah, that's what.
So beliefs are always moving with the either or, between two polarities. Or I'm good or I'm bad. Or it's love or it's hate. Or I'm male or I'm female. Or I'm part of the whole or I'm rejected from the whole. Each belief, you know, see how it spirals? Circling between the two poles.
You're talking about a sense of isness, me-ness, okay, being. And at the same time as it's there, there's also an expansion, and it also meets up. There's also an availability, an allowance for the pain that can rise and fall. The feeling of rejection that also can exist, and the suffering that can also exist with this.
For example of rejection.
Yeah,
take the feeling of rejection. So we want the feeling of acceptance. So we start to create attitudes and expectations and realities to make ourselves feel accepted, or else we get caught in the reality that we're always rejected. And so our direction starts to be formed by this in our perception, so we've moved a step away from life. But so what we want is to be accepted, 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 but every time we're accepted, we're rejected at the same time, because the same one that accepted us could also reject us. And what is this question from the level of being genuineness? Acceptance or rejection. Who is to accept or reject? It's here. It's anywhere here. At such a depth, so alive. What's acceptance and rejection matter? It's just a polarity.